Story 1. Years ago, I was part of a wedding where the bride was actually fairly reasonable, considering her biological father showed up very buzzed. The preacher got sick, so a substitute was made at the last minute who didn't have it together. There was a storm that knocked out all the power to the church, and it was pouring outside. Her aunt and mother-in-law were old rivals who fought about some 30-year-old thing the entire time. Despite specifying no children, several people brought small kids anyway. Two relatives wore white, with veils, in the audience. They were just hats, but still. The catering company was going to be late due to the storm, and call reception only worked outside the church in the pouring rain. But the groom was the one who lost it. He insisted on a Scottish-themed wedding of sorts, but it wasn't authentic Scottish. It was more like a fantasy in his head about Braveheart or some such thing. Some of the groomsmen apparently refused to wear a dress, tartans, so he threw them out of the wedding only hours before, including his own best man. He switched his best man to his soon-to-be brother-in-law, who had a mohawk and face piercings. Now, this brother-in-law was pretty stoked, but not taking it very seriously and goofing around with a decorative sword until, inevitably, he accidentally hit the bride in the back of the head. She said she was fine and that she was hit with the flat side of the blade. Even without the power, there was enough light from all of the windows in the small stone church so that you could see everything. And what you couldn't see was decorated by lit candles. But the groom was incredibly surly through the whole process, especially when it was discovered that the rings were still with the groomsmen who had already left after being thrown out. So the brother-in-law actually had rings on his hand and loaned two of them to the bride and groom. When the ceremony was over, they ran down the aisles to open the door in the pouring rain, only to find out that the limousine was missing. A few days later, we found out that the groomsmen had actually convinced the limo driver to drive them back to the nearby hotel, and due to a miscommunication, the limo driver thought that was all he had to do for the rest of the day. Luckily, somebody had a Buick that could fit the bride's dress, and while waiting to have the Buick cleared out, somebody realized that the back of her wedding dress was stained. It turned out that she was whacked by the sword and actually cut. Shortly after the bride and groom went back to the hotel, she got patched up and only the back of the dress was ruined. The photos were from the front. They tried to make light of all the rain, but it was really apparent that the bride was starting to wear down. Their photos looked terrible. The groom was grimacing, the best man was messing around, and the bride looked tired. In addition, all the added stress was making everybody else fight. The children who were not supposed to be there were all crying and being bratty, and there was no food to be had because the catering was still stuck somewhere because of the storm. The hotel that they were at, which was a small and rather quaint small town hotel, gave them all free food, mostly because their power was out in the kitchen and it would have gone bad anyway. That night, the honeymoon night, the bride and groom had such a big fight with one another that the bride actually packed her stuff and her maid of honor drove her back to her house where she spent the night there. The next morning, she came back and everyone just kind of blamed it on her head wound. The marriage ended 3 years later, but not just because the bride and groom were fighting. The groom ended up sleeping with that brother-in-law and came out of the closet. People should have figured out something was up with the groom when he was insisting on his groom's party wearing dresses. Story 2. My college roommate invited me to his wedding in Vegas. I live in Colorado, so attending this wedding already required me to travel and pay for a hotel. The invitation specified that the group should book their reservation at Aria under a certain group code to receive a discounted rate. Their discounted room rate at Aria is over $300 per night. When I told him I simply could not afford to pay for round-trip flights and a hotel room for 3 nights at $300 per night, he flipped. He said that we all needed to be in the same hotel for ease of plans or something like that. He expected me, a then 24-year-old female, to come out to his wedding in Vegas alone and pay over $300 per night for accommodations. And here's the kicker. He didn't even give me a +1. I later found out that the groom was so pushy about everyone staying at Aria because the bride and the groom received a free hotel room if 7 hotel rooms were booked under their discount code. It was really scummy of them to pressure their friends into booking expensive hotel rooms at their destination wedding and lie about the reasoning. Anyway, the bachelor party is scheduled for the night before the wedding. The groomsmen had put a lot of effort into planning an awesome bachelor party and they had pre-purchased tickets for everything. Well, the groom is simply a no-show for his own bachelor party. So I got to attend the bachelor party in the groom's absence, which was pretty awesome. We had a blast. Also, the night before the wedding, the bride was kicked out of the Britney Spears concert for trying to climb on the stage. Well, the wedding party had purchased Britney Spears concert tickets for the night after the wedding, and I didn't want to pay for a hotel room for an extra night and buy a $200 concert ticket for an artist I do not even care about. So I decided to leave a day earlier than everyone else and not attend. Even though I was already home, the wedding party still used the same group chat, so I had the pleasure of watching this drama unfold from the comfort of my couch 1,000 miles away from Vegas. I talked with a friend that was at the concert and said the bride was wasted beyond belief before the concert even started. He said that she tried to climb on the stage multiple times and received many kind of warnings before a cop pulled her aside. When she was pulled aside, she was so drunk she could not stand up or give basic information such as her name or birthday. He also said that the groom was being super confrontational and inappropriate with the cop. Apparently, the yacht swooped in and managed to prevent the bride from being taken to detox and the groom from being arrested for hurting a police officer. My favorite part of the text message thread is the bride saying, "All I need is support, guys," the next morning. Story 3. A college friend got engaged to an absolute witch of a woman. She was crazy, insecure, and would do things, lash out, and make comments when those insecurities bubbled up. She would make comments about how she didn't really want to marry the groom based on his physical appearance and how much he made almost every time she got a little tipsy. At work right now, or it would be a novel, here are the highlights. Before the wedding, the groom and bride recently moved into a new house that their parents purchased for them and furnished said house with expensive furniture that their parents also purchased for them. My fiance and I had just moved into a rental, we're dead broke, and we were watching TV on a mattress we had pulled into our living room. When I couldn't afford to attend the bachelor party, we offered to instead have them over for dinner to celebrate in a way that we could afford. Instead, we were lectured by the bride on how we should be spending our money and that we had to get our priorities in line. I mean, screw eating and housing yourself when you can spend a couple grand on 2 days of drinking, right? After this episode early on, they essentially stopped talking to us or trying to include us in anything up to the wedding. At the wedding, the bride is belligerently hammered, slurring her words slightly and randomly breaking down into tears. She uses her time at the altar during the ceremony to essentially do ad-lib to what the preacher is saying, trying to crack jokes and making weird noises throughout. The ceremony ends and the wedding party heads off for pictures. The bride, being buzzed and impatient, begins berating the photographer until the photographer is in tears. Fast forward to introducing the new couple. The entire wedding is essentially waiting for them at their tables, which are at the bottom of a long hill. The bride and groom are at the top while the DJ begins to announce the new couple. The only problem is that the bride is currently yelling at her new husband about what a piece of crap he is and telling him to go away. They stop for long enough to walk down the hill and take their seats. One of her bridesmaids was concerned and asked if there was anything she could do, to which the bride replies, "You can go to hell." The final nail in the coffin, the wedding party is sitting at a king's table like this. SXXBGXXXOSSXXSSXSSSO. X is a couple, S is single people, 0 is my fiance, and I, BG, is bride and groom. Well, I'm the 0 on the bottom right, and my buddy, who is single and sitting to my left, leans over and asks if I want to sit next to my fiance. I do, so he switches with her. Literally no less than a minute later, the bride walks over to my fiance and me, glares at us, and says, "Looks like someone can't follow directions." So, long story short, the most ridiculous request at this wedding was keeping my calm and not throat-punching the bride for being such a terrible person. Quite a request. One of the best parts was that throughout the entire wedding, family from the groom and bride, who we had never met, kept coming up and telling us we were so nice and nothing like how the bride had described us. It should be added that the groom's family knew how much of a psycho she is. The groom's sister literally pulled me aside during the reception and begged me to stick around, knowing that her brother's wife was terrible and it would only be a matter of time until they were divorced and he would need me. Story 4. I got asked to stand up for a wedding during culinary school by a high school friend. She said she didn't want us to buy presents but wanted us to help with various wedding things since it was a backyard wedding, like someone helping with the flowers, another doing favors, setting the table, etc. She wanted to know if I could help with dinner. I said sure and asked her what she wanted help with, figuring it was prep work for someone else to do. Nope, she wanted me to handle the whole dinner, as in cooking for 200 people while knowing I only have done a year of culinary school. She also wanted me to help pay for the food I'd be making as their gift. She wanted me to make Caesar salad, potatoes au gratin, and roast enough ducks for 200 by myself and pay for about half of it. I was learning to be a pastry chef. I explained that, and she just stared at me blankly. I told her I could make the cake easily enough, but she insisted she wanted a real cake from a bakery. I told her there wasn't any feasible way I could do it, not only because that's crazy, but because I literally wasn't trained to do it and I got uninvited from the wedding. They apparently served bag salad, boxed potatoes, and roasted chicken from Walmart. I have always wondered why some people just can't be satisfied. It's like this girl extended a hand to help with the wedding, but the bride had a different menu in mind. She wanted the entire culinary career served up on a plate. And hey, if you've ever faced a crazy wedding request like this, hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to my channel for more tales of crazy wedding requests. Story 5. I worked for a country club during my college years, and I recall one wedding party that thought it would be a brilliant idea to give their 300-plus guests the option to order their own steak and have it cooked to their preference as their entree. This might not sound like a big deal, but custom cooking 300-plus steaks meant that it took forever to get everyone served, and since there was limited capacity with the stovetops in the kitchen for this type of cooking, the food came out in intervals. This was chaos as a result for me and the other waitstaff because half the party had eaten and were drinking and dancing, and the other half was still sitting at the tables waiting for their food. At the point when the bride and groom were getting ready to cut the cake and have champagne poured, we were finally serving the remaining guests their steaks. To add to this delay pushed the event an extra hour and a half over its expected time frame and resulted in us having to keep the venue and bars open longer than the agreed upon time, which irritated the father-in-law as a result. By 11:30 p.m., the man was shouting at the manager to close the bar so people would begin to leave, and was chasing the bride and groom around and telling them to get into the limo and go away, as it was costing him about $7,000 an hour extra to keep the staff and venue open. I was getting $8.75 an hour, and I also didn't get gratuities as I was a seasonal hire. Yeah, I said screw this after a summer and a half working there. I left to work at a grocery store, and I enjoyed it far more for only slightly less base pay. Story 6. It wasn't one single request, but rather an unreasonable accumulation of requests that have added up. I am a bridesmaid at a wedding for a friend who moved to another city 5 hours away, and she and the maid of honor just kept planning event after event that all the bridesmaids are expected to attend. I had to drive in for her wedding dress shopping and bridesmaid dress shopping. They planned a 3-day-long bachelorette party in a third city. She's having 2 bridal showers. Her wedding is at a resort in yet another town where we'll have to take a 3-day weekend to get there. There is only one expensive hotel option, and of course, I also have to pay for my own dress, shoes, makeup, hair, and jewelry that she picked. Oh, and the whole bridal party is making her extra DIY-style nostalgia presents, as well as the regular wedding presents I'm expected to bring, so I have to buy craft supplies, which aren't cheap, and stuff for a fancy scrapbook, photo album, letter book, wedding day emergency kit, and a bunch of other stuff the maid of honor keeps thinking up. All of the things sound normal and reasonable until you start adding up the costs between $2,500 to $3,000. I had a teeny tiny super considerate wedding when I got married, and to be a bridesmaid in this wedding is literally costing me more than my entire tiny wedding. I do recognize that it's not an entirely fair comparison when mine was unusually small, but I think spending less than $3,000 to be at someone else's wedding is a fair expectation. I 100% regret accepting to be a part of her bridal party, and I would never do it again except for my sister. It's a huge honor to be asked, but I simply can't afford it. That maid of honor should remember she's helping her friend with the wedding, not organizing a full-fledged Olympic Games. Story 7. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid at the wedding of a male friend. I had tried to befriend the bride because the groom was a childhood friend. All of the planning leading up to the big day was a total disaster, and she used our wedding chat to constantly discuss all of her problems with the groom. The ring was too small, they never talked about finances before getting engaged, and now she's not sure he makes enough, or can you get a prenup for children you don't have yet? Constantly telling us we were bad friends. Keep in mind, we were all friends with the groom for many years before she was in the picture. I could write a novel about it. The final straw for me was when she asked me to plan a bachelorette party. but couldn't tell me anything about what she was interested in doing, clubbing versus spa day versus beach trip, etc., other than, quote, nothing too wild, but definitely cost-effective. And then when I finally presented her with a plan, she told me I was a terrible friend and that I was the worst bachelorette plan she had ever seen. I was replaced as a bridesmaid, but did not attend the wedding, and I do not speak to either of them anymore. Story 8. I was a groomsman at a friend's wedding. I wasn't the best man, but I was closest geographically to the groom, so I was helping with various wedding-related tasks. Not a big deal. I was happy to help. The bride was nearing Bridezilla status. She was fairly demanding and was fairly emotional overall. 48 hours before the wedding, the bride decides she does not like the shoes the groomsmen are going to wear. These are the shoes that came with our rented tuxes. My friend, the groom, had been mentally worn down by all the constant demands of his bride-to-be, and he was despondent trying to figure out how we were going to get new shoes for all of the groomsmen. So I decided to step in and be the voice of reason. I pointed out that we only had 48 hours before the wedding, and we still had a lot of important things to take care of. I also pointed out that for men's formal wear, there is a 2x2 matrix, shiny or not shiny, laces or slip-on. Finally, I pointed out that no one is going to care or even notice what kind of shoes the groomsmen will wear. My friend manned up and talked some sense into his bride-to-be. The wedding went fine and no one noticed or cared what kind of shoes the groomsmen wore. Story 9. I was in house security for a hotel that had a surprising amount of weddings. Most all I did was watch the bar, then intercept anyone causing problems at 11 to 4 a.m., simple suit and tie security. Bridezilla begins to have a verbal altercation with another female, then throws a glass at her and breaks the glass. I begin moving closer and the bride full-on attacks the woman, so I pick up the bride and separate them. The other woman is saying, "Okay, I'm leaving, it's okay, I'm leaving," and begins to leave, followed by Bridezilla freaking out, screaming and yelling. At this point, I've stopped restraining her in favor of her husband holding her. The other woman attempts to leave, I'm walking with her, and Bridezilla escapes whomever. I intercept the bride, who charges me, scratches, yelling, clawing, lots of clawing, nothing I can't handle. The other woman escapes to her car and the husband tells me to let her go and he will calm her down. So I let go. She runs and prevents the other woman from leaving. I move the bride away from the vehicle so the other woman can escape. While I'm in the parking lot trying to contain it, a man who just arrived runs at me and squares off with no warning. I blocked him and attempted a conversation. "Talk to me. I don't know why we're fighting," the dude says. He just arrived and saw me pestering the bride and jumped in. We have a conversation and explain that I'm security and I'm attempting to allow another person to leave. As I let this dude go, Bridezilla charged me again, standard yelling. I take a deep breath and I think I'm the last person causing her to freak out, so I left out of sight after getting some distance. So I'm watching on camera and the bride is now yelling at the bartender and attempting to get behind the bar. So I return and now Bridezilla is going crazy and everyone's leaving quietly. Bridezilla attempts to charge me again because I won't let her grab bar items. I'm really worked up now because this bride has gone crazy. I push to get out of the corner as well as regain control of the situation. While she's regaining her breath, I noticed I was a mess from her charges. My bartender called the general manager who sent me a text message authorizing me to end the event and call the police. I informed the bride that the event is now over, but this was a mistake. "This is my wedding, blah, 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 blah," or at least I think that's what she said. Police arrive and Bridezilla goes crazy on the police, but the police have more ability than me, so that didn't go too well for her. I'm cleaning up myself and taking off flares to determine if I want to press charges. A police officer walks in and asks, "Do you want to press charges?" And I say no. I just want everyone to go back to normal and for the bride to not return. "Are you sure? She's trying to charge you." "Why, yes, I do want charges." Gave them full video of every angle showing me completely in the right from the beginning. So with the help of 6 police officers, we found out what occurred. Remember that woman in the beginning who left? Her babysitter called saying, "Come home, blah, 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 children." Any reasonable adult would hear their babysitter, drop what they're doing, and go home to assist. Bridezilla was angry that a bridesmaid was leaving early. The ceremony was done prior to her arriving at that building. This was just cake, beer, and a meal. She had an emotional episode because a bridesmaid didn't stay for the following meal. The entire time, the husband just let me fight with her. He wasn't affected. He didn't attempt to calm her or restrain her. He just kind of watched. As things progressed, people left silently. I think once it started, other people knew something I didn't. Whatever she wanted to accuse me of, I'm sure was never charged. We had a nice video from start to finish, and I'm sure all the information they need is in the video. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you're also going to enjoy those who have been to a ruined wedding. What happened? Story 5 will make you cringe. I'll see you in that video, and thanks for watching this one.